Welcome to the Deep Dive.
It's great to be here.
So today's a bit different. We're digging into a specific set of sources you, the listener, shared with us.
That's right. All focused on a recent, pretty controversial case in Brazil.
Yeah, involving comedy, free speech, and a comedian named Léo Lins.
And the core situation, based on these materials, is pretty stark. He's been sentenced.
And not just any sentence. We're talking over 8 years in prison.
Plus a huge fine, right?
Yeah.
Over 1.4 million reais.
Exactly. And the reason given, jokes. Jokes he made during his stand-up show.
Which, I mean, immediately the sources frame this in a very specific way.
Definitely. It's not presented as just, a standard legal outcome.
I know. It's portrayed as something much more serious. A dangerous step, even.
Raising big questions about censorship, about the state of free expression there.
Some of the language in the sources is really strong, too.
Yeah, things like another stark example, that we might be sleepwalking towards a form of dictatorship. That's a direct quote from the material.
Wow. So, okay, our mission today is clear then.
Right. Let's unpack this source material you sent. Pull out the arguments, the perspectives, the specific details.
And really try to understand what these sources are highlighting about the case itself and, maybe more importantly, the broader implications they see.
Okay, let's get into it.
So the sentence itself, over 8 years prison, that massive fine.
And the sources emphasize the court called the jokes prejudiced. That specific word is highlighted.
Right. And the immediate reaction in these sources, overwhelmingly, is that this is censorship.
That's the main thrust, yeah. That it's a clear move to restrict what people can say.
Especially comedians, artists, people expressing themselves creatively. It feels like a step toward, well, like that quote said, something more authoritarian.
And that leads directly into another major point in the sources, audience choice.
Yes. The argument comes up again and again. If you don't like Léo Lins' jokes, if they offend you,
then don't watch him. Don't buy a ticket. Don't consume his content. The power is with the audience.
Exactly. And they use those analogies, don't they?
They do. Like, if you hate rock music, should all rock bands be arrested?
Or funk music, same question. Or a TV show or a book.
The point being made, according to the sources, is that dislike shouldn't equal a crime. You just turn it off or walk away.
And they also get into the nature of humor itself.
Yeah, that comedy often works by, satirizing groups, poking fun.
And interestingly, some voices in these sources argue Lins's humor is actually seen as inclusive by some people.
Because he jokes about everyone, right? The sources actually list the groups mentioned by the court.
Black people, indigenous people, Northeasterners, obese people, the elderly, homosexuals, evangelicals, Jews, people with disabilities, people with HIV. It's a long list.
A very long list. And the argument presented is that humor is subjective. What one person finds funny, another finds offensive.
Or just bad. Bad comedy. But should that be illegal?
That's the core question raised. Should taste or even offense lead to jail time? The sources seem to emphatically say no.
Which brings us to maybe the heaviest theme in this material. The claim of hypocrisy and double standards.
A really powerful undercurrent, yeah.
The sources draw this sharp contrast, this severe sentence for jokes.
Versus what they see as much lighter treatment for really serious crimes.
Yeah, they mention killing, trafficking, theft, corruption.
Even political scandals, like officials implicated in Lava Jato getting reelected. The comparison is stark.
And they hammer home the point that the sentence itself uses the word piadas, jokes.
Multiple times, apparently.
So from the perspective in these sources, it looks absurd. A comedian's words in a theater, treated with this immense severity.
Well, as one source puts it, politicians might say absurd things in an official capacity.
And face, well, arguably fewer consequences. The sources mention Lula as an example of someone saying things seen as absurd without this kind of penalty.
And there's another layer to this double standard argument in the sources based on political leaning.
Ah, right. The idea that some comedians who may be seen as more left-leaning get a pass.
Yeah, the sources mentioned joking about Jesus, the Porta dos Fundos special, things that caused outrage but didn't lead to this kind of sentence.
They're sometimes called the politically correct or the beautiful people in the sources, suggesting a kind of protection.
While others, maybe not aligned that way, face the hammer, there's that comparison made between Cocielo and Bruno Gagliasso, too.
Where Gagliasso, despite apparently worse past jokes, according to the source, was seen as shielded by media or marketing muscle.
So, pulling it all together, the argument strongly presented in these sources is maybe it's not just what you say,
but who you are when you say it.
Crucially, who gets offended. especially if those offended have power or influence.
Yeah, that seems to be the core concern expressed.
The sources also include specific voices to back this up.
Like Paulo Sousa's reported comment. Sarcastic, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like Lins should have gone into corruption, not comedy, if he wanted to stay out of jail. Oof.
And Firmino Cortada, sounding quite distressed, calling the sentence wrong, saying it buries humor, buries freedom.
And he apparently mentioned older, maybe edgier shows, like Caseta and Planeta, Saidi Baiho, lamenting a lost space for that kind of comedy.
There's also Jonathan Nemmer, another comedian, featured quite a bit in the sources.
Right. He really focuses on that word piadas jokes appearing in the actual court sentence.
He finds that significant. And he also makes an observation about Lins's audience.
That people from the groups Lins jokes about are actually there in the audience.
Yeah, he specifically mentions people with disabilities, obese people, blind people attending the shows.
And there's that anecdote he relays, which is quite powerful.
About people with disabilities actually going on stage.
Yes. And saying, according to Nemmer in the sources, that they feel included by the humor, that they feel seen.
Saying things like, nobody else looks at us, or nobody plays with us.
It presents this counter-narrative, right?
Yeah.
That for some attendees, it's not offensive, it's connective.
Some sources even use the word cure or healing to describe how some attendees perceive it, which is, directly opposed to the idea that it's inherently harmful.
A very different perspective from those who weren't actually there but are judging from outside.
Nemmer also apparently adds a personal note, saying Lins is actually a kind person backstage, contrasting the private person with the public judgment.
But the biggest fear running through all these sources is the precedent.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That this isn't just about Léo Lins.
The worry is palpable. This is a signal. Censorship could spread.
Nemmer puts it bluntly, according to the sources. Today it's Lins, tomorrow it could be me, could be you, the listener.
And the sources even suggest it could reach, say, religious leaders.
Yeah, potentially being stopped from discussing parts of the Bible if someone, somewhere, decides it's prejudiced. That's a fear expressed.
It all circles back to that argument, who gets to judge art?
The consistent line in the sources is, the public should decide.
By buying tickets or not. By showing up or staying home.
Not the courts, not the government. That's the view presented.
And the overall feeling, it comes across really strongly in the material.
Dismay, concern, fear even.
Words like absurdity are used frequently. People saying they feel sad, scared, deeply concerned.
And that sense that the country might be heading in a tenebrous direction, a dark, gloomy path regarding basic freedoms.
So, okay. That's our deep dive into the sources you provided on the Léo Lins case.
We've looked at the sentence, the arguments about censorship and free speech,
the points about audience choice, the claims of hypocrisy and double standards,
and that specific viewpoint from some attendees who feel included, not offended, by the humor.
Right. So reflecting on what these sources argue, that this sets a dangerous precedent, that maybe it's more about who speaks and who takes offense in powerful circles.
Here's something to maybe chew on. As presented in this material, what could this kind of legal action mean for your own freedom to express views that might be unpopular or controversial?
Or, for that matter, for the freedom of voices that are perhaps already marginalized or less easily heard?
Definitely something to consider.
Thank you for sharing the sources that prompted this deep dive.